I usually kind of like at the beginning of the next big project, I just scrub everything and
Oh, like physically clean it all up.
yeah, well, yeah, clean the office out, get the desk, and it's just been. I mean, haven't gotten anything solid. It's just been fun.
Right.
I have my phone mount on this like insulation, like pipe insulation, because I mean it's a newer phone. With the old one, I just shove it and like clip it somewhere.
Right. The
I
holder is
don't
maybe
really
not
want
the
to.
most sophisticated piece of technology, but the phone's new.
No, I need to get a little like mount with a arm thing on it, but it
That's pretty
works good. I got
handy.
a
Yeah.
cam link, but I need to hack my Nikon again to get a clean output. I don't know. They just don't want you to have nice things. Everything needs to be hacked. So now I'm like ready to do work on it, ready to animate and do all this stuff, and I don't really have anything to work on right now.
Is your setup all primarily Windows, but then you have ways of booting Mac and things to make sure it
Oh no,
runs on
I
different.
don't use. I mean, I play games on Windows, but
Okay.
unless I can avoid it, I just no. Animate runs on Mac. Um, I mean, what else? I've been using Final Cut Pro more recently. I've been trying to record VHSs and update things. I don't know. It's just been weirdly nostalgic recently. I don't know if it's something with Flash dying or having kids or getting older or
Right.
not having a main project to focus on. But
I could see how that
um,
would get the old nostalgia gears turning.
that's weird.
Especially the Flash dying. I feel like that really put a lot of people in a weird mindset. I'm like
Yeah.
working on a little web game project for the first time in 9 years or something. Just it's obviously not going to be a Swift file like Flash, but it got me
Yeah.
like craving that as a project, I guess.
Well, it's because I hear from so many people. Um, I mean, I'm sure everybody's known that family where the mom hated video games or they couldn't play anything until they finished homework or they can only play on weekends. Like all these restrictions, or no, we'll never buy a video game thing. What a waste of money. Um, and then all those kids went to the internet to look for games. And a lot of Flash games were very much like Flash games, which is a fun thing to talk about. But then you had so many kids that just wanted to play like a platformer or something that they felt they were missing out on as their family was against having dedicated hardware for video games.
That's
And so
actually, yeah, that's something I relate to super strongly. I didn't have a console till I was 16, 17 years old,
mm,
so online games did fill that role. Do you find that that's something you were specifically drawn to, that you thought you could provide that, or it was something you similarly like didn't have access to and wanted to do
no,
something
so
about?
I had a Super Nintendo pretty young, and that's one of the ways my dad and I would really bond. Um, because I was more into computers, he was more into sports as a kid, and that sort of thing. So we had a few games that we just loved playing together, and so for me, um, I had very much a console mindset of video games, and I really appreciated the multiplayer aspect of it, and because of that, I always thought of them, as something more important than just sitting alone and playing. And I think video games, as an art, can be extremely powerful and extremely important. And so when I wanted to make games, I think I took that mindset into it. I I'm really contrarian with most things. So if I see a fad or what kind of games are popular in the Flash space, I'm probably going to make something completely different, just because that's how I am.
Right,
When I started,
5 minute little instantly
yeah,
digestible things. You want to chase something that's a more of an experience, maybe.
yeah. Well, there's I'm looking at Newgrounds, and I was always a big fan of the freedom and the creativity and the I mean, as a teenager, just the craziness and madness, the dad and me, like, and I mean Pico School, like the edgy sort of like, oh,
Yeah.
you can't find this on a Nintendo system sort of games. um but when I started working on the first Fancy Pants, it was more about like nobody was really making platformers, and that sounds weird to say now because all the indies are making platformers, and then Nintendo got back into it. But when I was working on, I think it took about a year for the first one. So somewhere in the middle of that, the first new Super Mario Brothers for DS came out. And I remember being like, well, I need to get that because I too am making a platformer. So I need to see what Nintendo's up to now. If they're, what a new platformer looks like. So it wasn't even that, that I want to make a game like what was popular then, because this was pre-platformer revival, like 2D, pre-indie 2D revival. I think the what would that would have been? Like we were playing Guitar Hero and stuff like right before that. That was
Yeah, that I think
the
that
time period
makes
there.
sense. That is an interesting window of time that you were occupying then, and so you were drawing from, I guess, an earlier era, or were you kind of going in with the mindset that you wanted to try and do something new and put your like specific unique stamp on it rather than being inspired by, or there's no one at the time to really follow the lead of?
Yeah, the simplest way to put it, I think I've said before, is I was making a platform. I was making a platformer because I wanted to play a platformer. I was making a new platformer because that's just what I wanted to play. And I mean, it's the advice I usually give the people. They're asking what to work on, what software they should start with, because it's such an investment. So you really need to be careful when you start learning something or start working on something, because you don't want to throw away a year of work. But I mean, the simplest way to think of it, as long as you're making something that you want to play, then none of that's ever wasted. You're going to be enjoying yourself no matter what. You'll always have something of value if you're making just the kind of game that you want to play. And that's what I was trying to do. I would, if I ever was not having fun testing the game, I just added something new, and it kind of kept going like that.
Right.
I think like if you're not having fun playing your own game, then like what are you doing? You need to make sure that I think that's felt through the development.
There's I recently just did an interview with the guys, Soul Game Studios. They do like Swords and Souls and Rogue Soul and some of those games. And honestly, Severin from that team had a really similar mindset of, he didn't really believe in external testing. He just trusted his own instinct. And that seems to be what you're saying as well. Like if you're not enjoying the game, then you need to be able to trust yourself and trust your own instinct there. And I wonder if that's a mentality that would be more common by the bootstrap Flash developer than it would, a bigger.
Well, there's two. I think there's two separate things there, because I think they're both very interesting. There's the external testing thing. I think we were. Well, I think I was working on like World 2 or World 3. Oh, let me put the cat in a room. Hold on. Cat cameo.
I'm surprised mine hasn't.
I had him in the bedroom. I must have forgotten to close the door again when I went to get my phone. But he hears me talking on any sort of call, and he has to come say hi.
I'm shocked. I don't have a cat visitor so far. I would have fully expected to at this point.
It's not a Zoom call without cat cameo, but he just hears me talking. He's the loudest, most talkative cat I've ever seen. I'd be doing a business call or something, and people would be like, "You got kids?" Because he'd just be like, and now the kids and the cats compete over screaming into the phone.
It's a funny insight into everyone's home life. Everyone gets to see each other's pets and everything.
I mean, I've been doing this since the beginning. That's the weirdest part. Now everybody is, the whole new set of video conferencing software, Discord and Zoom, got popular recently. Before that, I mean, AOL died. Skype kind of is hanging in there, but like, it's weird seeing everything going to just where I've been, But let me throw this guy, because that's interesting. Let me see if I can articulate that better. All right, but
I got my own featured appearance.
Oh, there we go. I
too.
should have said hi.
I don't know if this cat's attentive enough to even recognize that like see another cat in front of them or anything.
No, North don't care. He's if he's being pet, he's happy. If there's another cat taking pets, he'll get mad. That's about it.
Right.
Um, but with I think it was Halo 3 was the first game. Well, let me start. There's a point in Halo 3 where there was like a hallway, as you do, and a big enemy, and I just kept like banging my head against it over and over. Like I was telling myself I was going to beat this stupid thing, and I was going to do that my way because I mean it's probably a theme with trying to make a non-violent stick figure popular on Newgrounds. I'm gonna do what I want to do, and that's the only thing that's really like feels rewarding to me. But you know, I was gonna beat this stupid thing. You know, I was getting closer and closer, and then you know, I died, and instead of going, you know, what I was trying to do over and over, I looked the other way, and there was a room with a shotgun and everything that I needed to defeat this enemy. And turns out, I saw sometime later that Halo 3 was the first game that Bungie did a lot of external testing for, and heat maps, and like had psychologists, I think, on staff, but they were like doing straight consulting and you know, heat map of where people were dying and getting feedback. And it just felt like they looked at a chart and said, well, everyone dies right here, so let's give them a shotgun so that they don't get too frustrated, because, you know, gamers, am I right, they're just gonna get mad and throw their controller. And it felt so fake. It just completely took me out of it. And I
Right.
was
The
angry.
game is being pressed on either side to this middle acceptable difficulty, I suppose.
Well, it's just that I was having this kind of emergent fight, this struggle, like this battle, and suddenly it wasn't just me doing that. It was everyone else who's ever tested the game had the same fight. It was no longer my fight, and I was given tools to deal with that fight because that fight has happened thousands of times already, and it was no longer mine. It was no longer important to me, and it just completely ruined it for me. And so I think there's something to making the game that you want to make, and you need to have people test. Like that's just, you know, you got to put the game in other people's hands. One, just to keep yourself motivated, because that's the fun part, watching other people play, and people will do bizarre things. You know, you have to read minds. You have to figure out what they're trying to do, and if you can allow them to do it, then do that. But if it gets in the way of something else, like a different mechanic, you know, the game has to be able to tell what they're trying to do between two things. And if that gets too blurry, and you know, then they'll be like, why is it doing this? I want them to do that. Then you have to make a right way to play the game. Like it's a hard thing. Nobody wants to say that. Like there's no right way to play their game. If you say that somebody's playing your game wrong, then you are a bad developer. And I don't like that line of thinking.
Do you feel that in your own game creation then, do you think you would personally address that problem by, you know, tweaking the level? Maybe that next jump is a little bit less difficult to make, or maybe I need to give the player more tricks in their tool set to achieve it in a way that feels more comfortable to them. So like a design or a gameplay perspective, I guess.
Yeah. So some people, they say they'll have hard and fast rules for their game design. Like they never want. I'm trying to think of one. There's the big one. Like they never want the player to be too frustrated or like run out of ammo anymore or have lives anymore. I'm trying to remember what it was, but there was just one that was making a big comeback. Like hard and fast rule, never do this. Or, you know, can you do this? And I'd say like you can do whatever you want, but you have to be aware of what it's accomplishing. And this is probably mostly coming out before the Souls games got really popular, because we had this huge push. You know, Flash is such a weird space because it came from this indie revolution, and there was two big parts to that. There was the the Peggle, and then Bejeweled, and then Angry Birds, and then there was Braid, Super Meat Boy, was the Hades, even from the Xbox Indie Arcade coming from that, and it was like Snipper Clips, that all has like Flash
Right,
lineage
right.
to it, and so the one that was getting the attention was Bejeweled and Angry Birds, even though Flash games were getting more plays overall anyway. Like nobody, there was no visibility to that. It was always the press talking about, we're going to expand the gaming audience. We're going to make everything more accessible. We can get more people playing, which the best way to do that is to just make more games instead of making sure that your game doesn't really appeal to anyone. uh,
Mm.
does Dark Souls need a easy mode? Well, no, because then you're going to think about that. While even when you're making hard mode, you're going to be thinking about easy mode. It's going to change the identity of the game. Um, like when I was in college, the first Halo was out for about a year or so, and all these people who were not gamers, they had not played a game since like the first Mario game. They all beat Halo 1 on Legendary because that was the cool thing to do. It's not that a game can ever be too hard. It's that your game has to be good enough that it's worth learning and defeating. So I'm more of a, like, don't make the game easier, like make it better. If there's something that the player is having trouble with, communicate to them. You're doing a bad job of communicating to them why what they're trying to do is maybe not the best option.
So
Not let's just make that thing easier.
I wouldn't want to put words in your mouth or assume, but
Yeah.
it seems like with
I'll argue, don't worry.
okay, with Fancy Pants, then I guess you didn't have the mentality of creating the platformer, the online platformer that everyone was going to play and this was going to bring everyone in. Like, I'm sure it brought in new fans, but in your view, your audience are the people who want that type of game, like same as yourself. You want a new platformer that you can invest in, that you can attempt to
Yeah.
perfect and practice and get better at.
I think if you're making a game, you need to pick one thing to be good at, like one section. And with Fancy Pants, it was the feedback. The idea of Fancy Pants, I was just doing the silly little animation. I was always big on flip books and stop motion. I did before games. And I was just drawing the stick figure, and I decided to give him pants because stick figures without pants, just they look wrong to me. And he was just running back and forth, and I've posted the animation a few times. But just watching just like the slide, the having unique animation for the sliding and the stopping, I hadn't really seen that in a platformer, and that was everything from Fancy Pants sort of comes from that. And so uh, I guess I was excited about doing something unique with that. Um, but it wasn't. I think that a lot of indie games have a problem with, they need that gimmick because that's that you can tweet, right? The one, and then sometimes it works out amazingly well. Braid with the time travel is an incredible gimmick. The difficulty of Super Meat Boy, that like is a gimmick, but it's incredibly fun. But there's so many indie games that just have these weird gimmicks that don't really make any sense. And so I wanted to start from, I mean, to me, the gimmick of Fancy Pants is just how it plays, like a very core. And with Super, I especially tried to focus just on that. That's why I took so much out of it. Because, like I said, if I got bored while making World 3, I just started adding stuff. And I realized a lot of the little things I was adding are things to help with frustration. They were just band-aids. They were covering up issues with the game being too floaty or too unresponsive, or the animation taking priority instead of the controls. And so with Super, I just stripped everything out that was trying to cover that up, and that made me actually fix the core of it. And I guess, yeah, one of the things when a lot of me making games is a reaction to what I want to see done better, I guess. And I'd see people leaning on a gimmick, or that tagline, or the Dark Souls of everything, the Dark Souls of Bejeweled games.
Oh, definitely. Bejeweled,
And
right?
so I was just like, if I'm going to make a game, it's not really worth making a game that somebody's already made. And I want to show that I can make a game without relying on a gimmick or without needing. I guess I saw too many games just not really worrying about how the game felt to play, and the excuse was, well, it's about the graphics, or it's about the sense of exploration, or this. It's okay, but it still needs to feel good to play, and so I'm just put everything into that, and I'm just one guy, so it ends up, being very, very focused on that one thing. And then the way I design levels, it's more of a playground than a series of button presses, which another QuickTime events. Like I'm going to make the anti-QuickTime event, which to me, and my rule when I change the engine, you have to be able to jump and land on your head. You have to be able to break the game's physics. They're not set in stone. They're not a binary choice.
You're not
it has
looking
to be
for
so
that
fuzzy.
no pixel precision. It needs to allow the player to go at their own speed. I like the idea a lot conceptually of the series being like just conceptually gimmick free. Like it just is the gameplay. It has a scribbly doodle aesthetic. That's not a gimmick. That's just a stylistic
That's because I can't
thing.
draw.
It's that's one reason to have it in there. Or just the way you pop in and out of the different worlds, or the way that you have your pen that you can shoot ink with and things. Those are gameplay rather than any of the hook for the game. The hook for the game is that it's a really clean platformer with really
hand drawn aesthetics, kinetic, lots of feedback. I mean, it's like 5,000 unique frames of animation, something, or 8. What is it? It's like twice as much as the current world record holder, which sounds way too much for what it would actually be. But I need to submit that one day. I'm terrible at self-promotion and media and social, whatever.
That's impressive. You don't remember offhand who the current record
holder?
Oh
yeah, Skullgirls. There's like an average character, and their most is like 3,000, which sounds way too high to me. I don't know how a fighting game could have that many frames of animation, because each one is like 5 frames. Like each move is like 5 frames. I don't think they have 1,000 different moves.
I guess. One thing Fancy Pants has, which I assume is what beefed up the frame so high, is that there's transitional frames between most things. And I don't have much experience with Skullgirls. I don't know if they have that. That's the only way I could think you could get a frame count that high.
You press the button, you're punching immediate.
Yeah, you have to.
And the only thing you have kind of a follow through, principles animation, all that. You have to basically have to fake the wind up and then rely on the follow through. So yeah, I would have to. That's what I'd like. Sources, please. Please cite sources. I want to see all your frames, because if they're like, all right, now we're holding this one image for 5 frames, because that's what fighting games do. We're like, that's not 5 frames. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, maybe they skewed it a little bit in each frame, whereas like Fancy Pants, that's 5,000 uniquely drawn images, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that's a lot. I guess a lot of it's interesting trying to find what makes Fancy Pants unique, because a lot of it is just that it was a Flash game. And when I was talking to people about the death of Flash, I was saying I have so many people that, especially in like Flash Player 10, right before we had 3D acceleration and all that, they said, I didn't know Flash could do that. And it's like, well, the only new feature I'm using is being able to cache the entire background, because otherwise it would be 3 frames a second. But other than that, the hit testing, the ground, being able to find an angle, being able to just draw levels out, hand-drawn levels, being able to have, back then, hundreds of frames of animation without, I think even now the player, if you take out all just the player, he's like 5 megabytes. So back then, it was like half a meg.
Right.
So you can basically put unlimited animation, and if you're making a stick figure and you're terrible at animating, so you're just doing it quickly anyway. Just keep making frames, and then ActionScript itself is such like a scripting language. So the first game basically tied the code to the animation, which is why it's really difficult to make it online or do anything like having a player move based on data other than like raw input, because whatever animation the player's on, it's running that function. So it's just scripting. It's just thousands of lines of code of you're walking, all right, well then, what do we do? If you let go of the button, then do this. If you are keep press the button, do this. If you hit something, do this. And it's all out there, because that's ActionScript is so clean and like human readable.
Is that all still ActionScript 2? Because I think 3 they tried to step it
It's
outside, right? Like it exists within the game and then communicates with like movie clips rather than like the code existing on a frame of animation.
You can put the code on the timeline still, which is weird. And then I stopped doing that a while, but with 2 you could do like on load, do this stuff. So once an enemy popped in, you'd be like, well, this one has extra health, and you just put it right there. Whereas this one, you can do like component parameters, and it's making it so much more programmer centric. Instead of giving you more power, you could have used ActionScript 2 and just made it fast, and then we could have done anything with it. But it's like, to make it faster, we need to make it completely different. It's like, classes are cool, just having everything nice and neat, but most of the performance improvements always come from them forcing you to do things more correctly. Which,
right.
New WebKit release 800 times faster JavaScript. Like, okay, well, let's do that. That sounds nice, So you see the browser getting faster and faster at running with basically the same exact language, and Flash Player would just add bells and whistles, and it never got faster. And then but I never even. It was not that big of a deal because of how slow it was drawing the vectors. So they could have hardware accelerated it a decade ago, and then the code would have actually mattered, and then just keep going from there. And everyone else was doing that, except for Adobe. The Castle Crashers has its own like Flash Player on the 360 and PS3, and I don't know if they ever ported the whole thing over. But Scaleform is a bunch of games with just a Flash interface running as a hardware accelerated triangle, all on the GPU. Literally what Adobe should have been doing. So it's everybody, I think, has put more effort into Flash than Adobe, which is very strange. Because every mobile game looks like a Flash game anyway. So every single mobile game that looks like a Flash game that isn't running in Flash should be painful to Adobe. It should be physically painful whenever they see a Flash-looking game not running in Flash, because it should have taken over the App Store. It's bizarre. They're there. It's just such a pain to get it. With Fancy Pants, at least with Super, it was easier to get Air acting like a real video game engine than getting most other video game engines acting like an animation program. So that's the only reason Super is still in Air, but we're gonna have to move on.
You didn't actually recode the game dramatically or anything? You were able to lift. Are you still using like chunks of code that you wrote back with World 1 that it's still functional?
No, I had to. Some of it was kind of copy pasted, but when I moved to ActionScript 3, I had to rewrite all of it. And then the methods got more, instead of just throwing everything on the stage, okay, now we have placers, and then that puts things on the stage so that we can reuse them. It gets more, more efficient, more real programmer like. But it's weird that I would even need to do that. Like, are we just going to make another Unity? We already have Unity. We already have Unreal going more indie. We had like Game Salad years ago and Game Maker, and Flash was very unique in those ways. It wasn't pixel art. You could, right? You just throw things at the stage and then it worked. And that was such an amazing hook for people who were more in animation than game development. I think programming does take a different mindset. To like, I was even looking at like OpenFL, different ways to run. Um, Again, everyone put more effort into Flash than Adobe. But once you
Right.
start doing that, you need to then have a completely separate file for all your art and assets, and then the code is looking at that. And especially when you're starting or learning anything, that immediate feedback of, all right, there's my thing, I want to make it jump. Like, where do I put the code? There's where I put the code. What's the thing called? Oh, there's the name of it. You can just address it immediately. You can draw a line, and then you can immediately give it life. And I think when you're learning, that's just so important to be able to get that immediate feedback, to be able to see what's happening visually, to be able to make it move and do things, and then just go from there, get more and more complicated. They
Oh,
need to let you do things wrong because that's the easiest way to do it. And unless you're making, a new Crisis, just make it fast enough that I can do everything wrong. There's no reason that I should make sure everything is just nice, neat, and pretty, and done properly like a real programmer would do. Um, then there's no reason that the optimization should come from me for a 2D platformer running on 5 gigahertz, 8 core computers nowadays, and
that's true.
just
Yeah.
monstrous GPUs. Like, we can crunch proteins in our own house now, and I still need to make sure that everything is pre-cached myself, by hand. I have to set up uh, where the data is coming from. It's insane. And so, I mean, the worst thing about the death of Flash is just we're never going to see that. I don't think we're never going to have an animation program that you can just hit a button, have something doing a thing, and then you can link to somebody else. And like, that's just, everything that Flash did well is just going to be a missed opportunity now. It's gone. It's going to be, you're going to have people that think differently that are not going to be able to make those things anymore. Unless they got in with Flash and now they're like, oh, I guess I'm gonna have to learn, Unity and 3D things and coordinates and setting things up. And
It is interesting that pipeline of work and how you would approach things is fundamentally going to affect the end product. Like I've tried to play around with things like Game Maker. They advertise, the drag and drop programming and things to make it quick and efficient and easy to use.
well,
But,
no,
but
no,
then I
no, but
end
like,
up finding myself doing as much of the work in Flash as I can, exporting
no,
it, dragging it into this, trying to
no,
fight it to make it be more like Flash. And then fundamentally, that you're just making hurdles for yourself, and so
well,
you might as
somebody,
well learn Game Maker and not make a Flash game.
I think not only the more important thing, the output is going to look different based on the workflow, but just the kind of person that can sit down and make something is going to be different. And you're excluding people who don't think like programmers. I think that's something that big. Tom Fulp was very big on that. Newgrounds, that because I mean he stuck with ActionScript 2 longer than I did, and he made amazing games. Like, you
Yeah.
wouldn't even, despite Dan Paladin Singe back in the day, basically establishing what the Flash game looks like. It's still hard to even think of Alien Hominid and Castle Crashers as Flash games because they're just so good. So he pushed that like past the realm of you don't even assume that they're running on Flash anymore.
I think you
Uh,
discredit Fancy Pants a little bit, or maybe you're just being humble and not wanting to
eh,
include yourself in that conversation. But
I've watched how the sausage is made.
I
It's duct tape and bubble gum under the hood there. No, I've had to twist and adapt to get it working nowadays. Using Stage 3D, just the hardware accelerate super, using Starling as a, I mean, basically you have to cache everything, get it running, and think the thing that showed the most promise was scale form, because they had an indie version of that. But like Flash was always such a dirty word, so it was difficult for a company to say, hey, we can make Flash games run amazing. And people go, Flash games, hate Flash games. Why would anyone make a Flash game? Meanwhile, millions of people are making. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure tons of kids, have probably opened Flash and drawn something. Like everyone can make a Flash game, and it became. I mean, yeah, it became a dirty word.
I
The
imagine that's
second
a
Steve
big part
Jobs.
about why those guys went the route of the behemoth. Is that, if you want to take it to that next level, are you going to convince a publisher that you can take your Action Script 2 game and
Yeah,
upscale it and have that work at the appropriate optimization? And
but
probably
that's the
not.
best. That's another great thing about it. Like you can just because like that game company, Flower, Flow, yeah, Journey, they prototyped everything in Flash. I think Flow was the Flash game. So
Hmm.
you can convey an idea. Like you try to elevator pitch, and unless you're saying the Dark Souls of, nobody has any idea what you're talking about. Um, every now and then I'll talk to someone who is like if you're talking to somebody, if you talk to a suit, they have no idea what you're talking about. If you talk to a game developer, then they'll start throwing ideas on. You're like, yeah, yes, that is what I want to do. But with Flash, you just make something, you hand it to somebody, and then go, oh, it's fun. Like, and that's it. Like, okay, good. Well, let's expand on that. Let's keep going. You don't have to explain it. You can so quickly have something playable. You can test ideas. You can prototype. You can prove. Every Flash developer, we have so many, we just folders of tossed game ideas because we just, oh, I can do that. There's a spaceship. Boom, I can shoot things. Awesome. All right, next idea. And it was such a good tool to get ideas out. It's like I mean, it's funny that Fancy Pants turned out how it is, but Flash is like a sketchbook. To me, Flash has always been the pencil drawing of a game maker program. So you can just throw ideas out there. You can look at a hastily drawn sketch and understand what it is, understand where it's going. And if you have an idea that you have to sit there and go, no, no, no. Once I get the lighting in, once I color it, then it'll be a cool drawing. Get it out of there. Like start over. And so that's with Flash. You could really get to the core of what makes something fun. That's why like tower defense games were so big, because they took such a small sliver of, I mean, defense of the ancient, or what was the, not Dota, I always forget it. I haven't talked about tower defense since the last round of
Is this like,
Flash
are you
stuff.
thinking like another Warcraft spin out one though? Like
Yeah, yeah, but there
Winter
was
Mall or one of those? Or
might
Element TD was big on. Or are you
it might
thinking
have
the
been all.
Flash versions like desktop tower defense or those Gemcraft, those sort of
Yeah,
things?
so I mean the Warcraft version came first, the map mod, and then everybody like you and modders, I guess, is a big, should I learn Flash, should I learn how to mod Unreal games, like, yeah, like there's all these little ins to making games and trying out ideas. And the and tower defense, I'm sure that like, somebody needs a dissertation on the history, where it comes from, the mods. I mean, it'd probably be a whole huge video. uh, Sometimes I wish I made YouTube videos or had time to. It's
Oh,
like you
I
just
have a notebook with like 300
uh,
video ideas where like as soon as something like that comes up, you write it down and you're like, yeah, someday that's gonna be
but
great.
I think, yeah, someday,
I have
if
my folder
only.
of like 50 10-second long animations that I thought would become a
Yeah.
thing, games that I thought would become, and now
Oh yeah,
now
yeah,
video ideas that I,
yeah. So you got a whole nother category to add onto the pile of like this would be fun.
yeah.
But that there's such a history there, I think, of coming of there was a mod, and then Flash took that, or Flash developers could take that one little idea, like desktop tower defense is my favorite out of those. Bloons still a huge
That
game.
shockingly, it's just wild how popular that one's
Yeah,
remained, and that's one of those funny ones of it's never tried to look like anything other than a Flash game. I don't know what tools
I
they use
know.
these days, but it just is a Flash game on your tablet. Like,
Yeah, I mean, basically, and if it doesn't run in Flash, there's something wrong there.
right.
Adobe messed up. That is more evidence of how badly Adobe messed up. If Bloons Tower Defense 5 does not run in Flash, there's something wrong there. Something horribly wrong. But to take that idea and be able to prototype it and hone in, like, so Flash is so good at just honing in on one little thing, and like to take one section of an entire gameplay type of the strategy, the real time strategy, RTS. And then the mods did that before. I probably need to look more into like where that really comes from, but to me that's just so Flash to take that one little bit, and then tons of games just based on that. All right, what else can we do? What if we block the path with the towers, desktop tower defense? Like, that's a new idea. That's awesome. We can make paths. We can you get the upgrades, get currency, and you just keep going from there. And to me, that's the pinnacle of just Flash, being able to figure that out, prototype it, and then just keep going.
I mean, thinking of the fact that, and if you still have a folder of any of your decade plus old experimental things, I always love seeing like the projects people have moved past. It's always fun to share those.
Yeah.
But do you have any memory of a moment while putting Fancy Pants together where it went from, press left to move, space to jump, any of that, to I am going to see this one through, like, rather than just, well, that was a fun experiment, I like the movement, to all of a sudden, like, this is a game. There's something here.
I think it's funny because I remember distinctly drawing just a circle around him, and okay, he's going back and forth, or how do I make things? Because I was learning at the same time. How do I make a platform? I guess I can use, just type a number. Right, if it's on 10 between this, then don't fall all the way down the ground. Stop there. I can just use a movie clip and get the coordinates from that and use those numbers. Now I have to look at all of them. I remember just drawing a circle around him, and then like, just holding right, and he just, he couldn't fall, he couldn't do anything else, but just like, hey, that's funny. He's just running in a circle. It's like that would be different. That would be neat. And in the first game, one of the bonus levels is a big cavern,
Right.
where you can just run in a circle. I think it was the moment it clicked, and that is why I made that rule. I just drew like, okay, I can go up, and then can we explore like this? Can we jump? Does it break the game too much if you just straight run up a wall? And I just had this thing, and I put a few things, and I probably had previous engines where it was a ball, or other characters that didn't rotate. So I had a few ideas running around. But I run all the way up to the top. He hits a wall, and I think I was trying to figure out, if he was rotated all the way over, if he would hit a wall, or he would think he was like this, so he would try to warp through it. And finally hits the wall, and he falls, hits something, and then tumbles and bounces on each piece of ground, and then lands on the bottom. And I just sat there just giggling about it for the longest time. And I was like, this could be fun, like the opposite of a tile-based platformer,
Right.
Because even Sonic does have a structure and everything's still tile-based. Have just something so open that you can just climb, you can, bounce around and be funny, and something unexpected could happen. I think that was the hook for me, that you could. You would be free. It would be the anti-tile based game, and surprising things could happen while you were playing. And then I was like, yeah, that is a whole game to me, or enough of a game that I would want to play.
It's one of the other recent interviews I did was the team that made Super Smash Flash, and the funny thing is that when they were starting out, he was trying to make a Sonic fan game, and he was getting the platforms going and integrating that. And one of the first roadblocks he ran into was he couldn't figure out how to make a loop. And he's thought,
It's not
this
easy.
is difficult. I can't make it work. I'm gonna make
I'll
a
make a fighting
fighter
game
instead.
instead.
Yeah, he just absolutely pivoted, which I guess that goes back
Yeah.
to that immediate flexibility. You try one thing,
Mhm.
you load it up, you test it, it is or isn't what you
Yeah.
thought. You follow
Yeah.
that or start
Yeah.
over.
It's funny because yeah, the closest thing to being able to throw something together, a lot of programs were going in the drag and drop route, and I never really liked doing that because I needed to see how things worked. Like I wanted the code to be simple enough that I got it, or at least I knew what it did. And I mean, man, maybe history would be different if, Flash MX didn't come with a folder that said AS2 samples, or I think it was AS1 back then. It was AS, just ActionScript samples, and one of them was a rocket ship, and you pressed up, and it added gravity based on sine and cosine, and knew which way it was facing, and it could add thrust based on which direction it was. I was like, well, if it knows to go that way, then I can just, I ripped apart the sample. Like, what if you just press the button and oh, now it's going that way? Turn it. Okay, now it's going that way. Okay, well, I can rotate that this way. Now we have at a 90-degree angle. Now we're just going back and forth. Like, well, I just take the normal speed value, translate that to the rotation. And then, I mean, it's just these little simple building blocks. And I think if you drag and drop those building blocks, that's too simple because then you can't use them for other things because you don't get what they're doing. And I probably still don't really understand what sine and cosine does, but I wish they would have told me that you could make a rocket ship back in school, and maybe I would have actually paid attention. Because then,
Right.
like, oh wait, this math stuff is actually you can do neat things with it. Like that's kind of missing from math nowadays. I think it's numbers and angles, and well, it should actually be spaceships and platformers, and
Right.
maybe it actually makes sense.
Right now you're either going to be an engineer or a mathematician or it's irrelevant. They're not
Yeah, yeah, well,
advertising
it
that you
feels
could make a
irrelevant.
game.
And then you start making a game, and you're like, oh no, the trajectory of a ball, like gravity, interesting. How weird. Like this stuff actually does that. Or, how getting like the angle of a bounce. Um, I think somebody was like trying to make a Flash game in some forum, and they had like uh, some algorithm. I don't know, it would be some formula that didn't even make any sense, but it worked most of the time. And then, I mean, the easier way to do it is just, take this, use sine and cosine, and rotate the entire world. Then just do a y negative, and then rotate it back. Just rotate everything back. The character where he was, where he's going, rotate it, flip it, rotate it back. So it's like once you kind of get it, you can do all these crazy things. But yeah, it's just that one uh, like the rocket sample that use sine and cosine to apply thrust, and then the limit the speed. That's pretty important too. Um, to take this up and down movement and then translate it into whatever angle you wanted to. And the second I figured that out, and it was just put a feeler out in front of the character. Okay, I'm still going through things. Put one behind. I can do this, and I mean, those methods, it's still pretty similar for super. It's just running a lot more checks and then like doing a bit more real. I think now it just draws a ball around them. So the engine can't be surprised by something coming from a different direction, but then it does that. And then instead of going up and down next to them, which can break if it goes this way, it just go either if it's still hitting, go this way. If it's hitting, go this way. And then if it's not hitting, go this way. And so it rotates around them, but it comes from just being able to take, 10 pixels that way, and then we can translate it to any point around them. So it's such a simple idea, but Flash, I guess, was just simple enough that I could see how that worked and expand on that to do all these different things. And it's like, because you tell someone, oh, the line formula, distance formula, that's how fast something's going on a grid, X and Y. It's like, no, it's not the speed formula, it's the distance formula. Like, yeah, but what is distance? But, what is speed? But the distance you travel in a frame. So it's all the same thing. And it's kind of hard to explain that sometimes, or maybe I'm terrible at explaining that. But once you know what it does, then you can, expand from there. And, the Fancy Pants code, it's not really complicated. It's just a lot like a lot of really simple things all working together and tweaked by hand, and then crammed into place so that it doesn't misbehave constantly over many sleepless nights. Um,
I mean, with
but,
the amount of different variables there that you're
mm,
controlling, and the fact that it's a bunch of small things, do you find anytime you try to introduce something new to the equation, a new form of movement, a new type of platform that he could interact
mm.
with, does that now mean it's not just a matter of I jump on this and bounce it this way? Like I have to test out 30 different ways of interacting with
we,
this thing.
yeah, you definitely have to test it constantly. And then other people, you have to have other people testing it because they will break your game. They will play it in the most bizarre way, especially kids. They just start doing things and you're like, I thought of that and I thought that would work. Okay. Um, but yeah, giving players that freedom, they can have fun in many different ways. They can break your game in a million different ways. And then, at least when I rewrote the entire engine for Super and AS3, I kind of knew what I would need. So there's, just instead of having the code for each frame, doing everything individually, and having code, copy and paste it everywhere. I need to keep everything in functions, and so if something went wrong, I could pretty much figure this is where it's going wrong. If I need to change the animation, don't just change the animation, call that code that makes sure everything happens correctly. So that's just years of breaking things and messing everything up. The least amount of neat code you can do, the better. Or I guess for instance, the ink dash, you move much faster than you do normally in the game. So it would be really easy to go through things. But since, I knew I needed to, tried to keep the movement the same as the normal movement. But then I made it in a way that you could just call it over and over again. So if you're going 80 pixels and you want a precision of like 10 pixels, then it just does it 8 times, and that's just built into the movement. So some things I introduced that are new, and then I'll have to rewrite the core functions, but I make sure that it's the core functions that are changed, not not just something slapped on top, because then you start getting things bugging out, and then you don't know if it where it's coming from. But I remember, sometime in World 3, the engine was finally good enough that I could just make the level that I wanted to. Because even with 2, the only because people ask about custom levels, and it's like if you do anything slightly wrong, the whole game's just gonna crash. Like I would, oh, it works well, it doesn't bug out. It's like, yeah, that's because I make sure every angle is not too nuts, or you can't hit a wall going upside down, and like all that was built into level design. And then going back, knowing, okay, well, if I can get all this working properly, then I can build different levels this way and this way. But it really, with Super, it was just having to rethink everything from the ground up, which is frustrating because Super is the first one that I really think plays as good as like it does in my head. Like I'm really proud of how that feels. The entire game is just focused on getting the movement right, and then being able to then do whatever I wanted around that without it breaking, or without glitching out, or trying to restrict the limitations of the engine by getting the core of it correct. Right. And then now I want to focus on everything else, and I'm just not really haven't been working on a new Fanspans game in a while now, so it's kind of a lot of missed potential there.
It's interesting to think that there's almost an illusion of that freedom, of absolute freedom of movement in the first 2 worlds then,
Yeah,
where
definitely.
it's this free-form sketchy environment, but you have carefully controlled all the variables so that you
handcrafted, hand tweaked. It's all, there are definitely training wheels going on with the level design just to make sure that that illusion isn't broken. And yeah, Super you can throw a lot more out of it. And I mean, having springy platforms and being able to bounce off of things, and you know, every now and then that would break, but it was great having when, you know, Discord started getting more popular. I had a lot more people helping test, and speedrunners just breaking everything. And you know, you could dash and hit something, and he'd bounce because something just happened to make him think he was a ball for some weird reason, and he would just go the other way and keep going because of how the distance was. And it's just so the last things that you add to the game are always the things that are just slapped on there, and they are the ones that break. So, and with Fancy Pants, with the first few games, that was everything. Everything was just slapped on there to see if it worked. So once I got, you know, the main meat of the game working, and then, you know, oh god, I got to release, you know, soon. Then we start slapping things on, but having, you know, I did, you know, most of Super myself, whereas the 360 and PS3 game, we had, you know, over the top, was doing the console games sort of alongside me doing the Flash game, so I was able to support Super myself and fix all that stuff a lot better than with the game before. So.
I had a question that I felt sparked from part of that there. Just with you coming back around to doing, you know, your remixes of these worlds, I really thought maybe it was, you know, you've refined the engine. There's new things that have been introduced, new ways Fancy Man can move and interact, and you want to incorporate that. But now I'm also curious if maybe you went back in and tweaked, and it might be subtle ways, but were you tweaking the level designs and things as well, other than like, you know, just to better match maybe what your initial vision is? Maybe you had a compromise where you're like, I can't really get away with that. And
there wasn't too much of that, because I keep going back to level 1, world 1, just because it's so distinct to me. Like, that to me is Fancy Pants. And whenever I think that was I would test the newer, if any changes I made to the engine, I would go back to there and see, you know, if it played, if it still felt familiar to me. I think the main difference, probably from like level geometry, the only thing is that in the first game, all the platforms had to be perfectly straight, and then in the remix, they follow the art better. But I think the level design of World 1 kept any changes to the physics grounded, instead of me trying to change that. And then with the remix, you know, being able to break open parts or open up new paths, and then having different, you know, new bonus levels, I could use more of the, you know, that's relied on how I guess the state of the physics at that point, or you know, the newer features of the engine. But I do like having, you know, being able to explore with more control and more freedom, and then you know, being able to find new things, especially with Cutie Pants being in the World 1 like remaster remix, you know, straight up having new paths that weren't there before. I love the idea of you being able to use the grapple cat, getting to a place that you could never see with Fancy Pants Man. And it's like, was that always there? Like, was there always something here? I think the main thing like that in the remix is immediately to the left. There was supposed to be a cave, and then I just forgot, so it's kind of drawn like a hidden cave. But then the first game, you can't get in there, and so, you know, in the remix now, that actually has a cave in there. But just the idea of like, oh, I couldn't jump high enough before, or you know, was something broken? Was this cave always here? Just makes it feel more like an actual place than just I don't know, a amusement park ride, I guess, is probably the biggest insult I can think of for a video game. A dark ride, which is kind of sad, but I guess that's where my head is at with what I want people to get out of video games.
I think I even have memories of when I put together that original retrospective on Fancy Pants Adventures several years ago there that I tried to boot up like 3 or 4 different versions that I could find
Mm,
of World 1 and getting footage from each one, thinking like I want to compare these and see how the momentum and the physics and the
mm,
animations, if maybe they've all been tweaked over time. And you start doing things like you crack open a part of the level, and someone who's been playing these for a lot of years and who's actively comparing versions, I had to stop,
mm.
go back. Was that
Yeah.
always there? Is this new? Have I like is did
Yeah.
I just never think to do it in that way before? And there's a lot of
Yeah.
satisfaction revisiting those levels and seeing the ways you've built them up and fleshed them out.
Yeah. I mean, I do love even the idea of the first game felt open enough that you questioned whether you could have done that before. I think I love watching someone who just picked up the controller and like a speed runner, and just how different they can play the game. Because if you're playing a video game, it's all fake, right? Except for the fun that you're having, and any social interactions. And then what you really take from the game is what you're learning. So the progress that you've made exists outside of these ones and zeros. The game gets deleted, you still that experience, the emotions and the art of it, but then just the skill, you can take that with you. So always, if I'm making something new, I like to ask myself, what does it look like when a completely new person's playing it? And then how different can it look if someone experiences playing it? What am I leaving for them to master? And I think that's a good benchmark of how open you can keep the game. And speedrunners will just break everything. So but I like the idea of having that outside of like boundary breaks or like cinematic loads and turning the camera just away so that you go straight to the credits, and like, okay, but what can a normal person do? What can like the everyday gamer kind of walk them through? If you're going downhill, you get faster, and people, to me, that's so fundamental to the game, but nobody gets that. They just try to climb up a wall, and I'm like, just go back and run. That's why you need other people to play it, because they don't get that. But then you see they start to figure that out, and then to me, that's the features that I really want to expand on. That if a completely new person just tries to run, just run up the wall, because they're used to Mega Man, you press the thing and it just goes that speed, or Mario, you kind of get a sense of that, but the slope has nothing to do with it. Even Sonic, you can roll down a hill, but I don't think that's ever really used. And
No, I
so,
think he has a consistent downhill speed, right? Like it doesn't. I don't know how
well,
much
like
it truly builds.
if you want to go really fast and break the camera, you can roll downhill, but there's not really a point where you then, and you can't really see far enough ahead that there's a ramp and you have to jump, going higher. And that's something I love, that people can learn that as they're playing. And so that's something that, especially prototypes for the next game that I had been working on. To me, that's the most interesting thing. Like, how much can a player change? How much can they learn? How much can they adapt? How much cooler does it look? How can I guide them into figuring these things out, and running downhill, jumping up, and then, they get a master of the controls, but then they get it. I think one of the trick to Mario is that you can always jump higher and run and further than you think you can. So as you play, you realize you can actually make this jump. So it's not just fighting with the controls to be more precise and be better at the game, but you're learning how much more you can actually do, because the faster you're running, the higher you can jump. And you start to figure that out. And then so when the levels always have this illusion of like looking harder than they are. And then you learn that they're not, not only are you experienced in it and you've done these jumps before, but you're telling your brain that, like, I can make that. If I'm doing this, I can actually make that. It looks harder, but you've grown as a player. You've taken that with you. And so you just need, like, how many things can you give the player to grow, I guess, as they play. That's an interesting concept. that
How much do you think that would influence your own approach to level design? Because like Mario, pretty left to right. You jump and you
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 know
jump up and you jump
well
across.
the
Sonic
funniest
is
part of
more
that,
up and down. Fancy Pants feels very freeform, and I'm curious
yeah,
how much you want someone to be able to slide down
yeah,
this hill, make that jump, chain together a pen draw,
yeah.
and or if you would rather just have a bunch of options and let people go
So
wild.
that was the focus of the newer prototypes that I was working on for the next game. That specifically, it looks cool, but still not on rails. I think video games have a problem with not knowing how to look cool while not being on rails. So you can still. I hated the whole mobile. Everything was a runner with no control, and you know, it's like that's fine, but let's capture that energy with controls. There's no reason why we can't do that. It's not one or the other. There's no reason to not be able to do Cannonball as like a Metroidvania. Like, I mean,
Mm.
other than it being more work, but like, if you're not going to make something nobody's seen before, what are you doing? Um, but so yeah, man, I was getting really excited about some of the prototypes that I was doing for World 5 working title. Um, Level design that looked more difficult than it was. That once you knew the extent of your abilities, it would not only get easier, which I mean, it's the simple thing, but then you could approach it differently. You could make jumps that you couldn't before. You could avoid going the long way around. You could just look cooler doing things. I always loved watching, YouTubers because they would go out of their way to look cool doing things. I love watching Let's Plays with fans because they do something, they do all these backflips and they jump on something, make sure to hit this just right, and then you'd rock out in an end celebration. I was just like, yes, you get it. You know how to play Fancy Pants. To me, that's the right way, and that's one of the reasons I love multiplayer so much, because you could just show off while playing. You can mess with each other, and just there's a freedom there. And I want, one of the things that I'm bad at is taking what's good about those different ways to play, the multiplayer, the freedom of that, and bringing them into the core level design. And that was something I was specifically trying, like pushing myself to do, because I would have the difficulty would be tucked away in the challenges, the freedom of movement would be tucked away in the multiplayer, the speed would be tucked away in the races, and it's like, but why I need to be more confident that players will want to be better at the game. You just believe in in the player, that they can get better, that your game's worth learning and worth getting better to master, to defeat. It's all on the checklist, like the legendary mode of Halo 1.
Right.
And
More
it's
layering
hard.
together of the speed and the skill and the
Yeah, or just
style and
requiring it. Like, I'm saying, like, you can't that was the craziest thing about Bloodborne. Like, in the first like hour of the game, there's a part where I just could not get past. I was like, or it was like first 10 minutes. So it was literally 5 hours just trying to get past this one part, and after that you upgrade enough and you figured out enough that it's not that difficult after that. But that Bloodborne had the confidence to say, you will not get past this part until you understand how to play this game. And with the casual thing, I mean, when I started playing games, like I said, there was the indie and then the casual, and casual's taken off, that everyone needed to make their games easier. But I think there's a confidence, there's an identity in saying, like, no, this is what you need to do. There's a respect of your player that you think that, or that you trust that they can. And then, if they don't want to, if it's not for them, if they don't like it, if that's not their genre, then there's other players out there. But to water a game down just so that you don't get that, I think is a huge disservice to the game and to the players that do crave that. because they're the ones that they're going to be passionate about it. They're going to love that. They're not just going to play it or get addicted to it. They're going to love it, which is a huge difference.
I like the idea that maybe some of that is a design mentality that spawns from Flash developers. You know, we're so accustomed to building a game
Mm,
that is something people are going to get the most out of in maybe the only 5 minutes they have to give you. And so there's no
mm,
point holding their hand, get right into it, make it
yeah,
hard. You know, you see developers like Ed McMillan who have
yeah,
become as big as they are with Super Meat Boy, The End is an Eye, Binding of
right,
Isaac.
right.
Those are hard games.
And
And it,
there's a respect for the
yeah.
player there, because yeah, Flash, you cast a net so wide. One, Super Meat Boy started as a Flash game,
Mhm.
or sorry, Meat Boy,
Yeah.
and he could look at that and say, "Oh, people can do this. People can play a game like this. Let's keep going." And then, that I think Super Meat Boy did hit very well. The indies, it's supposed to be a Wii title, and Wii was huge, so all the journalists were talking about it, and so it had a lot of good exposure on it, and besides being just a really good game, like one of the few games I can think of where there's a run button that actually matters. Like he actually made the run button matter. It's not just, oh my god, hold run, no, hold run, and that's why there's no run button in Fancy Pants,
I
because
remember dying 30 times thinking, well, my instinct is just hold run and just go
exactly.
at max speed. I guess that is a funny way
Because
that,
I
that
think
Fancy
trust.
Pants operates. You do run.
Yep.
There's no point having run and
No,
no run, just run.
no, and then I'd see how people played it, and there's a lot of, it's fancy physics, right? If you let go of the button, you'll kind of sail into a fairly logical arc, but if you press the other way, you almost stop dead, and then you
Mm.
start going. So it's not I think like Shovel Knight does it. You got this great momentum, this great sticky, not sticky, but like weighty, meaningful feeling when you're on the ground. But then you jump, and it's just the Mega Man thing, and I love that. The best feeling in video game is when there's a primary action, a secondary action, which is very much a principle of animation, where you're jumping, you're kind of aiming yourself, and then you're doing something else while your brain, this amazing machinery, is calculating the trajectory, and you're not even thinking about this while you're trying to do something else at the same time. And oh my god, I can go in 50 different directions with that. I tried to, with the start of Fancy Pants, or when a person just sits down with it, they can just focus on one button at a time, right? You press the button, animation happens, running happens. It should be a good feeling, and it's that's why it works so well on a keyboard, I think. Or I had to tune it for a keyboard. You can really think about only left or right at the same time, whereas Mario, you're like wiggling constantly to kind of aim yourself.
Mm.
And Fancy Pants, you kind of throw yourself into the air, and if you change your mind, it's this hard decision to stop. So it works really well on a keyboard. It works really well on touchscreen, where you're just really thinking about, and then you're holding one direction, and now you're just thinking about jump. So you're kind of thinking about one thing at a time, and then there's everything else going around there. So it's not really about the controls. Where's it even going with that? But it was funny when the Wii came out, and then VR, and people are saying, "Oh, motion controls are going to be the future because buttons are so hard." It's like, whoever got confused by a TV remote, like, it was the weirdest thing when people started just like, "Oh, touchscreens going to be the future because buttons are really difficult." It's like, has anyone ever said that? Like, you don't know how a button works? But the idea is, when you do VR, you can focus on one thing at a
Yeah.
time, and so you're picking something up. It's not all these buttons to do a thing. You're doing it's not even that motion's natural, because pushing a button is a natural motion. We know how to push buttons. People who don't play video games know how to work a doorbell. Nobody's ever been confused by a doorbell. Like, it's just the most bizarre thinking possible.
I'm hoping that we've kind of eclipsed that a little bit, and like we
Yeah.
had, the glory days of everything is touchscreen oriented. Like I have like a
Mhm.
10-year-old TV that doesn't have physical buttons. It's all touch things all along the side for the
Yeah.
and it's like, why? I just now I have to fish around and I'm not touching them with the right
No.
sensitivity. I just want a button. I want the
Yeah.
feedback, that immediate interaction and response, and like, yeah.
Well, it's tactile, and there's something
Yeah.
to be said about something things being tactile, and there's ways to give feedback, the vibration or the sound. But the main reason, um, see, with touchscreen, you have so much freedom, or like the Wii remote with the pointer. Nobody used it properly. You get all this, or the tilt on a phone. You can do so much with that, and my favorite phone, like tilt to live on the iPhone, uses the tilting differently than like an on-screen joystick. So
Hmm.
there's extra. It's the entire game is built around being able to quickly do this and having this precision of like a labyrinth game, and you can be zipping around things, and you have to figure that out. You have to wire your brain differently to do that, but an on-screen joystick would not feel the same, or trackball or anything like that would not feel the same.
I'll have to
Or
check that one out.
oh yeah, I don't think it even, last time I tried to play it, it glitched out, but
Oh dang.
I at least look up videos of it because it's really cool. It's no buttons, like you got a phone, you got the tilt sensor. We're gonna make an entire game around that. You don't ever press a button, and it's really good. And then a few games really use the touch screen. I guess Angry Birds pretty good with that. I really like Amazing Breaker, where it's kind of similar, where you're flinging things, so it's kind of skee ball, and you're trying to bounce and hit things, and you can use different types of balls that do different things. Um,
Part of me does
so
wish that, something like the Wii wasn't victim to console generations. Because
yeah,
I don't think developers were willing to completely rethink the way they design a game. Oh, you can point at the remote and input your character name. Now flip
there
it
you go.
sideways and hold it like a controller for the rest of
Yeah.
the
Uh,
experience.
or because I think one of the best Wii games, I mean, besides Wii Sports, is Boom Blocks. I don't know how popular that really was, but it's one of the few games I could get my cousins to like sit and play. And they're always like, "Oh, why are you always playing video games?" And family stuff. We bring
Oh,
Smash Brothers.
that is the one I'm thinking of. This is the one where like Steven Spielberg or
Yeah, yeah,
someone,
yeah.
yeah.
It's so good. It's based around being able to point and then having that, just how fun, like trying to throw something at a pile of blocks is. It's
Yeah, it's not even
any other
that.
system, it would not have worked. I mean, VR nowadays, obviously, but because
I
VR can kind of do anything really, which is
Yeah,
great.
but
But
some of my, like you're saying, Wii Sports and Boom Blocks were like
yeah,
some of the most fun I had with people
so
coming
good.
over and just engaging with it on that level for
Yeah, and you'd
sure.
have a controller in one hand, beer in the other hand, and you just pass it around. It was so easy to pass around. You'd play while standing up, and people would be sitting and watching and laughing. And I mean, yeah, the Wii came out when I was in college, which is probably the best time to have that. Like people just be like, "Hey, what y'all doing? Can we come over and play the Wii? Like, you want to come play video games? Okay."
Yeah,
Like,
I had it set up in my dorm room. It was awesome. It was
yeah.
the ideal way to experience that for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I
And
have
then
a
it's just missed opportunities. So many things like that. The Wii controller, I think Flash, the community of Flash, the ubiquity of the Flash player, um, light gun games, like
mm.
just missed opportunity because because somebody was chasing the money, they were chasing the latest fad, and they weren't. They couldn't imagine like how cool would this be if I made this? Like, oh, that's a light gun game though. Those are dying. It's like, so what? It's like, and so now we just don't have, again, like with VR, we're getting that finally, so that's
Yeah,
exciting.
I had a VR headset a few years ago. It was I got into early almost. I ended up selling
Yeah,
it because I was seeing that, this thing has 7 different wires. I have to mount things in the
yeah,
corner of the room and like
yeah, right.
and I have to make sure I have the computer to match it. It crashed all the time because it was beyond my computer. I ended up selling it
Mm,
because
yeah.
in a couple of years we're gonna have the computer free. It's just a headset.
Yep.
Like,
Well, that's what I got the Quest, and
oh,
whenever I
awesome.
show someone that,
Yeah.
yeah, if you haven't got a new set, definitely grab a Quest too.
I
I
had
think
the
they're
Rift
amazing.
1 or 2, or it was like the Rift C or something like that.
S,
Sold
I
it.
think.
It might have been
Yeah,
that, yeah, Rift S. That sounds right. And I sold that off, and I figured I'm going to give it a
yeah,
couple of years and buy back in because like
Sure.
yeah, it's going exactly where I always hoped that that would.
Yeah,
And
but with the
yeah,
'cause if I show somebody like what to explain VR to them, there's a few games, the room scale. There's Crisis VR Gate is amazing. It's just Time Crisis, but you're in the thing and you can like hide behind walls. So like I've missed light gun games for years and then found that on side quests, like the indie section for the quest. It's like this is a light gun game, but the future, and it
right.
is the most amazing thing ever. Or like being able
I
to like
found
walk
that
around a maze in VR. It's crazy.
yeah, just popping people into the tech demos is fun to watch them
Yeah.
interact with it. But the some of the most fun was the horror game experiences.
Mm.
Like I've never, I
You
struggle
don't
with
make
horror
those let's
games with horror
plays.
movies. Pardon?
You don't make those let's plays of shrieking at Five Nights at Freddy or
Oh
anything.
God! I mean, I have played horror games on the channel, but I
Mm.
tend to not like I don't handle it well to
I
the
don't
point that
shriek.
I don't scream. I shut
Yeah.
down. I get
Yeah.
scared
Oh
and
yeah. That's yeah. No,
that's that's
I
not
was playing.
entertaining.
The last one that really got to me was Amnesia because
Mm.
they knew to make you not look at the monster. Like they knew, and that's such a brilliant move because then you're like, oh my god, I shouldn't look at this thing. Because once you look at the monster, the whole game's ruined, right? So
Yeah,
they like it was built into the gameplay and it's so
yeah. You
brilliant. And I
see
was like,
that model like just in a T pose or whatever, and it's like it's not really much
oh,
of
the
anything.
alien trying
It's
to clip through walls, yeah. But I was doing it. I was playing it. We were staying somewhere. I was trying to play it on a laptop, just with the trackpad. So it was also difficult to do, and that like connection of like restriction, like the restrictiveness of it, and then I guess instead of like sitting on the sofa with a controller and like being in it like late at night, like something comes at me and I just like I freeze and just kind of like pull away from like the laptop screen. It's just this completely like guttural reaction to it, like how effective that is. And I don't know if it's just the perfect setup for that or what, but it definitely was not a funny let's play scream. so, so I don't know if I would be one to do that.
yeah. I up to this point, I guess we've largely freeformed all this and just kind of
Yeah,
chat
yeah,
things
yeah. I
through.
mean, I'm gonna
Um,
start just getting tired of this.
oh, I don't want to
Trying to
take
so
up.
if there's no, I'm just saying, yeah, if there's anything you want to like specifically address, please.
I yeah, my
Get out
original
before I start
document
like
I sent
shutting
you that
down.
was like too many
What's that?
questions probably.
Uh,
Yeah, but maybe I should just I don't know. Do you have anywhere you have to be like coming up soon?
No,
Should I
no.
try
I
and
mean, just other than hiding the kids in the back room so that they're not like running through the house, they're probably gonna. I mostly like just been trying to fix up my house before I get on and like the next big project. So it's been a lot of you know, I don't know, a lot of long procrastinated fixing and cleaning and stuff of when I'm in deep within like making a game, it's just like I'll deal with that later and everything becomes a mess. So just taking the time of like post pandemic and like between projects, I guess, to like re-insulate the attic and
right
fix
right.
everything. So I mean it's like it's pretty boring right now. I can't give you a pitch of like, oh, I'm working on this and it's gonna be this and we're gonna change gaming. So I hope that's not too boring of an interview.
Oh no, I am a little bit curious. Like you were mentioning the other day that you're like the recent sale was doing quite well, and you're
Yeah,
feeling
yeah.
like confident into maybe being able to settle into more of like a working mode for the next stretch here, and we're like a going deeper into a project. Is do you consider yourself like full time independent game developer? Or are you
I
doing
mean, not.
contracts in between, or like other
I haven't in
whatever?
a while. I definitely did with Super. But man, the one thing that Flash had that like I have not deciphered is just the exposure. There's just something about putting a game up on Newgrounds and having that hand curated front page. And if a person liked your game, they'd tell other people. If they didn't, they'd, never speak of it again. It wasn't what went viral on Twitter. It wasn't who's making the most controversial statements. It wasn't, what Let's Player hit, is promoting your
Right.
game. It was just so pure, and I didn't have to worry about the viral or social aspect of any of that. And I hate doing that sort of thing. So
It's
with
not game development, it's why as soon
yeah, I
as
mean it's like doing
anyone gets
taxes. Like
yeah,
it's work. I
as
don't
soon
want
as
to do that. Or
someone gets big
debugging.
enough, the first thing they do is they hire like a marketing person for the team.
Yeah, so I've just never I don't like exploiting things or gaming the system. I don't know if I just refuse to do that. Like chasing trends, or if I'm doing contract work for somebody, then sure, tell me what you want. But that was just never satisfying to me, and that would just be a waste of a year. So what am I supposed to do? Go on Twitter and say horrible things until people throw a GoFundMe? Like it just
Right.
side. And Flash was so pure in that way, where the game was either good or it wasn't. You didn't need anything other than people playing the game, and the audience was always there. It was millions and millions of people. And the worst thing about it now is that that was so hidden, right? There's no like, man, I would get so mad when a YouTube video went viral with like 1 million views, and it was the people would show up on late night shows to dance or sing or whatever they did on YouTube, and it's like, oh, 1 million views, that's cute. Like, I got that within a day years ago. We're okay. So what gets me on the late night show? 10 million views, 100 million views. Like, nobody saw that. It was never, like I said, Flash was a dirty word. YouTube was the next coming thing. And the first time you saw a video with like 1 billion views, which was years and years later, it was a big deal. Everybody was talking about it. Twitter trends, Instagram, TikTok, I guess now is the big one. Like, it's,
Yeah.
why is everyone talking about this stuff? Do y'all even like it? Or is it just that everyone's talking about it? Is it controversial? Do you want to, we can't look away from the train wreck? Like, it's all these things that make things popular that aren't, I enjoyed it. And that drives me nuts.
That really
So now,
was
I
the
have to,
that was the
I feel,
economy of Flash though. You have a
yeah,
you sneak 5 minutes in between classes to boot up Newgrounds.
yeah.
Fancy Pants is on the front page. You beat like the first section of it. Next thing you do, you go tell 6 of your friends that, hey, this new thing just came out. It's fun. You guys check it out. And
Yeah, and they could. It was just, Flash games could just stand on their own merit. You didn't know who made them. It didn't matter who made them. They that they were popular because people liked them, and there was such a purity in that. And I guess I can at least say, like, people like my games not because it makes for really stupid Let's Play videos, or it's a big joke, or it was controversial, or this one big Let's Player played it, or it was trending on Twitter, or or because people use it to make dances on TikTok. Like, there's all these reasons things become popular that I don't think I could, like, mentally accept as a success to myself.
right.
It's just, people email me. They still email me. Like, it helped that my games got people through deployment or school or childhood or not having consoles. And at the end of the day, that really matters. But no publisher, they don't know the numbers. Like, they
Hmm.
don't see who is passionate about the game. They don't see it. They don't see the trend or the fad uh, to jump on. They don't see the easy money in it. And um and so it's been hard lately. Like, trying to get to that next step of what can we do to be seen again. That's just the visibility. Like, what's visible on YouTube? what web comics are mainstream. That's, I guess, the closest thing I can even think of to like Flash games now is web comics. It's one person doing something they're really passionate about and
Mm.
getting this audience that absolutely loves it and comes back for it. And but like, how much of that's mainstream? Like, what do you have to do to be mainstream? Like, who do you have to sell your soul to, sort of thing? And
Yeah, like
and
I
super,
must be on the correct subreddits and things. Now and again, there'll be something that gets 1,000 upvotes, whatever a big amount is,
yeah,
of like just like a picture of Fancy Pants Man. It's like, who remembers
yeah,
this? And then
yeah,
there's like a
and
thousand thousands of people show up. Like, hell yeah, it's the
no,
best.
it's like, that's so cool to see. But like, those gets so many more hits than like any of our tweets about new features or releases or
Right.
sales. And like, thank God that people are still like posting and remembering it. Um, but it's like, come on, where were you guys when we were talking about this release or this feature or this app or this? And because it's hard to be, where what filters the winners and the losers.
Do you
I
find there's
think,
some level of distaste for milking that nostalgia rather than having people discover it in a new light and maybe find a new entry point to the series rather than just continually going back to the old well?
no, no, I don't think that's what I'm trying to say with
Hmm.
that. It's just like, right now it's a system, like visibility. It's a visibility now is a system, and you need to game it. You need to dismantle it, decompile it, and break it for your own personal gains. And I hate that. It's something that I loved about Flash games, that wasn't the case. Something was good, it got views, it got ratings, people knew about it. And I social media has gone in such a, how can we get more views? How can we be more controversial? How can we get people, coming back, or how can we get them emotional about this stuff? And so when Super came out, there was tons of people that were saying, oh, I miss Fancy Pants. Whatever happened to it? I'm like, I just released a new game.
Yeah, you're
And
looking
so
at
we
it.
get Reddit posts like that, and then I would jump in the comments and be like, "Oh, hey, I just made Super. I'm still doing it." And everybody would be like, "Oh, that's really cool." And we'd have really cool discussion, kind of turn into an AMA in the comment section. Um, but it's so difficult nowadays to broadcast that out. And so with the current sale, there was a publisher sale with Congregate, and then the Steam daily deal got tweeted out, and so suddenly it had more visibility than it ever had before, um, which is difficult for me to think when there's so many people asking about the series and wanting to know what happened to it, or hoping there's another game out. And there is, some people stop the world too, and they're like, oh wait, there's all these other games out. Um, but with Flash, it was just the pure reach that you had, visibility that you could get just by making something decent. Um, and like, there's a few client games, or freelance games that I did that I thought were still really good, because I don't like want to make a bad game. Um, but when they were attached to a property, it didn't get that reach, because I think it was that purity. The Flash audience, they didn't want something associated with the brand. They just wanted
Are
a
you
good
thinking of the
game.
Mirror's Edge one? Maybe you don't
No,
want
it
to
was Mirror's
specifically
Edge.
say, or
Mirror's Edge really well, just because, well, not just because, but Mirror's Edge was still being talked about, and then journalists jumped on that one, so it took my site down when we first. I just put
really?
a demo up of it, yeah, and it was just a little WordPress site, but I wanted to get the demo out, just the first level. Um, but there's other like branded games, and similar to Mirror's Edge, that didn't get that level of exposure, even though I think they're still good games. And when we're working with a marketing company, they can do much better graphics, they can do like really cool things, really good interfaces. But it's not I think it wasn't so much what the Flash audience was looking for. And nowadays, I don't know what anybody's looking for. I guess I'm just some old dinosaur in this, and I just kind of burnt out from trying to figure out how to get that out there. And I'm gonna, been taking some time off, at least with the Steam sale. It seems that if people know that the game's out there, they will buy it. And the hardest part is just how do you show people that the game is out without selling your soul to the system, I guess.
Yeah, the deluge of 700 new games being shared on Steam per day. That's tough to. It's funny because it's the same cycle or ecosystem that existed with Flash games. There was something new every day, but it was free, and so it was so easy to pick up 20 different things, give them a minute of your time each, pick your favorites, talk about it.
Yeah,
now,
I think it really was. Well, it was pre like algorithm. It was
that's true.
It was people who you looked up to that put the game for you to see. I mean, in the same way we have so many YouTube reviewers or YouTuber reviewers reviewing movies, and just talking about things that they're passionate about, not reciting a press kit. They're giving you just an honest opinion. I always thought it was so bizarre when you keep seeing this line as a criticism to like movie or game reviews. They say this isn't objective enough. They would dismiss it, like, you're not being objective. It's like, well, why? Like, why would anyone be objective telling you if they liked something or not? I do not understand that line of thinking. Mm-hmm. It was usually when they liked something or they were using it as a technical showpiece, or as maybe it was part of a franchise that they were really passionate about, but that entry wasn't really that great. And so you're not being objective enough. You're not looking at the things that this game is doing. It's like, yeah, but I didn't like it, but it wasn't fun. And that's all I want to hear from somebody. I want them to played it, and I want them to tell me if they had fun or not. And so for a while, like my wife was doing reviews on the site, and it was just the absolute opposite of objective review. It was just like the stream of consciousness. I started playing this. This is how I felt. You should either play it or not play it. And it's like, that's all I want in a review. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see the objectiveness or the algorithm or things being driven by anything other than like, did you like it or not? And I think that was the secret sauce of the Flash games. People, the amount of exposure game got was very proportionate to if people liked it or not. That was it. That's all there was to it.
Yeah, I just stewing in that a little bit. It just resonates a lot. So many people always ask about Flash game monetization and like all that sort of stuff, and it's all just an interesting subject to think of, that it just doesn't quite work that way anymore. And yeah, maybe I haven't actually released a Steam game myself, like gearing up to it, but cool. Yeah, it's I have to try and shut that out and realize, like, yeah, you don't have that day one money of a sponsorship that you then figure out the monetization beyond that. It's like you start at zero and build up.
Or the daily contests Congregate doing. The top few would get a monetary prize, which would help out, and you could see different audiences starting to have different opinions, which was funny. Like Newgrounds always liked Fancy Pants more than Congregate did.
Oh,
I'm
really?
not really sure why that was, because Congregate launched touting World 1, and then World 2 came out when it was still pretty fresh. But
Congregate was just starting at the time World 1 came out?
It was probably about a year after. I was working on World 2, and then it was one of the games that they launched with.
Oh, man. I feel like Newgrounds has just kind of always been.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
It was the first. It's
old as the internet.
Yeah, it's interesting to take a step back and think of like when these other big players joined that market and how they would have to try and distinguish themselves.
Yeah, Armor Games being big with the sponsorships, or it was more like a contest sponsorship. But then you saw Armor Games logo on everything, because of that.
That was a
And then,
quality flag. Like it was a big
yeah,
deal. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it helped get the name out. You had to be clever, which was really cool. And then, just some of the nicest guys working over there. And same with Congregate. They had office parties and see them at Comic Con and GDC and stuff. And it was just, man, so many just good people. I think the other secret, and like Tom Folk, just the nicest guy, all the old Flash artists,
Yeah,
just
Dan
incredible
McNeely
people.
at Armor, right? Yeah, that guy. I've never had a bad interaction with him.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to, I don't know where I was going with that. I think it's funny that Newgrounds would be so big on a silly little stick figure game, uh, because I don't know, they were more interested in quality than mindless violence, I guess, which is it was cool to see when push come to shove. They still really liked my game, even though it wasn't. Yeah, I didn't chase the Newgrounds fad. The audience still was into that. It was cool. It's cool to
Yeah,
see.
the controversy and the headlines for Newgrounds were always, Club the Seal and,
Yeah, right,
the really
right. It was
extreme
weird.
examples. And so people think that's what it's all about. But it was people who just want to
Yeah,
play good
I think it
games
was
and see something they've never seen or
it,
just
it was
like,
it was about
yeah.
people making what the things that they wanted to make. They thought it was funny. They thought Club and a Seal was funny. Madness, just going on a killing spree in the middle of a park with a bunch of crude shaped people. That was, why not?
I
How
guess
interesting, how weird that would
yeah.
be to see.
I guess the entire site was predicated on that idea of we're going to create this open portal. People add their
Yeah,
content. It's blamed or it passes based on its own
right.
merits. And I guess
And I
from
just,
day
man,
one, yeah,
the internet's gotten so far from that, and it annoys me.
I really dislike. I mean, now I'm pulling out my old man page here, but I really dislike what has happened to the Newgrounds review section. It's turned
Mm-hmm.
into a comment section, not
Hmm.
because the Tom changed it or anything. It's like people just leave 2-word comments. Whereas I remember like having
Hmm.
these engaging three
No,
paragraph
yeah.
long reviews where people really had a lot to share and feedback. And yeah, I do miss that. I feel like it's a little bit gone from the site, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, just, man, I would, with all the missteps, Flash and Adobe, and all I complain about it, like I would keep it alive just to keep the community alive, you know, just to keep that there.
Hopefully Ruffle
It's like,
does the trick. I mean,
what's
it's
that?
it's maybe too little, too late. Hopefully
Yeah.
Ruffle does the trick.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I mean, there should just be a export to HTML5 button, and
yeah.
we're doing that so Pokey's helping with that too, with Away FL. They
Mhm.
have a system, and I think they have ActionScript 3 working, but Ruffle can't play World 2 or World 3, but
Yeah,
World
it's
2 is
it's
on.
seemingly a ways away from it
I don't
too,
think it,
hey. Whereas
yeah, it
the
doesn't do
the
bitmap
Away
data.
FL version, that's like playable right now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's
it's online. It's Flash is dead, long live Flash, sort of thing.
Are there
So
any of the fancy games that haven't been exported with Away FL yet?
so 3 is coming. I think that's just a bigger game, so we need more bug testing and all. And then any of the HTML, or any of the AS3 stuff. I don't know if that's ready yet, but I think it looks close. We're doing releases staggered, so I
Hmm.
have to make new graphics and fun things for them,
Oh,
and I
okay.
just need to get to that. Um, but with at least with World 3, there's a console version, the mobile version, and then with Super, there's the mobile version, Steam, and then I
Hmm.
mean it was cool being able to break that up into World 4 and have people, getting some of that visibility. Um, but it's not like the demo for World 3 when we were working on the console game. We wanted to announce that and get views to the Facebook page and start building the audience for the console release. So I released a demo of World 3 and it got like 10 million plays in like a few days or maybe a day. Like it was crazy. Like, I mean, for something that's like a trailer for a game, basically, just the amount of spread that got immediately for a demo. It was crazy. And I don't think we're not gonna be able to do that again. We'll see, I guess, how HTML5 versions of things do, but it's harder to convey that. There's Flash games. You know what you're getting to in Flash games. There's not this is an HTML5 game. It's like, well, what does that mean? Is it a whole game? Did one person make it? Did a bunch of people make it? What's the technology? If I wanted to make something like that, what would I download? I don't know. Not Flash.
Right.
Unity, I guess.
Yeah, that's
there's not that one thing. There's not that name to it because Flash, Flash was a genre. It was an aesthetic style. It was a way to make games. It was a way to make games, play games. It was a community. It was like everything put together. It was so easy to convey that information and like kind of unite under that. We had a Flash Games Summit right before GDC or one of those. It was a whole conference about Flash games. It wasn't about the technology. It wasn't about what was coming up. It was just the games, the community, all that.
Is that the one awesome. That JMTB02 gave like a really big talk at?
Well, how long ago?
I might be. If that's
Flash Game Summit was a while ago. We were at PAX East last year, like right before everything went down. We did a remembering Flash panel, which was amazing. It was the first time I'd been out for a show in a long time, and it's crazy to see people still like remembered the games and came to a panel, because John was just like, nobody's gonna show up, nobody cares about Flash anymore, and it was packed.
That's great.
We had like an overflow. It was nuts. And man, I teared up multiple times that day. It was nuts. It was good to see. And at the same time, it's painful. It's frustrating because it's so hard to convey that to publishers or to investors going forward, how big all of that was, or that it can still be a thing. That it's not, the technology is dying because it was squandered on YouTube videos and terrible ads, but that's not all there was to it,
Right.
And it hurts in some ways.
Hopefully some of those more recent successes like the Henry Stickmin collection show like there's a viability to that it's not just, I don't know, there's a market for people who want that to still be accessible, who want to have that remain in a playable form for the foreseeable, reliable future.
Yeah, well, I need to get the old games out on itch.io or Steam or something as a pack. And just it's nice to see so much visibility on everything because of that, but it's sad that it took the death of Flash for people to like appreciate it. Like especially when streaming services were coming out on Live and Stadia and all these things, like before, I guess pre-Stadia, the first wave of them, all these marketing blurbs, be able to play the game without any download. You can just open the thing and play it right there. You can try out all these games. It's like, dude, that's Flash though. You've done that for 20 years now.
Right.
10 years now.
And if anything, they're making it less accessible than Flash ever was, right? That's
the thing. I don't think they understand what they're losing. Like, okay, so now I know when it says your Flash player is outdated, download this virus. Now I know that that's not true. But at the same time, like, what have you given up to get that? Like never. Why would that random site want to give you a Flash player update? Like, we shouldn't have to destroy Flash for that, because like there was one actual exploit for Flash player and it was immediately patched. That was the only time there was a security risk in the Flash player, and it was patched before it was found out. The only other security risk I can think of is the update your Flash player, Flash player.dmg, because I'm on a Mac. Never open DMGs and install things from random sites. Like, you shouldn't have to say that. You shouldn't have to destroy a platform because of that. The only
Right.
other thing I can think of is that they want the control. The Flash player was a black box to web developers and to everything, and they want the control. So it's a security risk if they don't control it. And it's like, man, so you had to destroy all of that just for that. I don't think that's an even trade-off. But then again, it would be a much easier sell or argument if if Adobe had 3D accelerated all the vectors, I don't know, fix the brush. I mean, because it took the death of Flash and then the rebranding to Animate for them just to fix the brush in Animate in artists formerly known as Flash. So it would be a much easier argument if Adobe kind of pulled their weight and made it easier to defend the technology there. But at the same time, it's so much more than the technology. So it's a stupid thing to have to defend anyway.
I do like the idea of, we very much collectively, or everyone understands mobile games. They know what that is. They know that it exists. You download it from the App Store. You play it on a portable handheld device. And I think anyone who has any computer literacy or grew up in the right time of the internet understands what a Flash game is. And I do really think that's interesting that, you can't call HTML5 games one collective thing, because that can be 2D or 3D. There's all sorts of different implementations and stylistic approaches. And you
don't download Flash to make it. You don't download a certain program to make it, other than like Unity, but it's a Unity game that is translated into WebGL. There's not okay, Flash is dying. What do I use to make HTML5 games? Type it in, and
luckily there's
an
ever-increasing pool of options, but it's not as...
It took a while, though. It took a long time. They were like, hey, HTML5 is the future. It can now do sound. Really? You're not making a good argument.
It's not very futuristic, is it?
No, it's like because they were trying to replace Flash back then, like all the way back then. Like, oh look, it does sound now. Okay, like Flash has face detection. Not like we'd use it, but like if we're gonna compare features, and it ran faster for the longest time. It was just displaying stuff, but I mean, and even with mobile. I mean, because mobile could have been, I guess, it still might kind of be, but mobile is the logical path from Flash. At least it was when we were jailbreaking our phones to play silly little things. And the second Apple put Sega up on stage to debut the App Store, and then EA, and then and Nintendo, of course, had to get on that. It wasn't gonna be the same from the get-go. It wasn't, that defined the App Store. Just these watered down, terribly animated. But look, it's 3D. Look what your phone can do. Look how amazing your phone can do 3D. Isn't that cool? It's like, no, quick, do a QuickTime event. Slice the screen. All right. So that's how that was set up and how that was defined, and because of that, it could never be what Flash was because of how it began.
I guess we're looking a lot at the end point here for Flash, and I mean that's a very relevant part of the conversation right now.
Right.
I am a little curious, is that where you got started? Because were there other ways that you tried to? You said you would animate in flip books. I think I remember seeing that you used to do claymations. But when did that become game making?
So I mean, and I think this is the kind of person that Flash was the most useful for, right? Like I want to be too selfish and be like, yes, Flash, keep it alive just for me. But as I was really young, I'd do little stick figure flip books, we had novels to read in English class, I would just read ahead because I was bored, and then make a flip book in the corner of it. I'd borrow video cameras or take old broken video cameras that my family had, and make videos with friends and family. And I was always trying to make something. I always wanted to make something I could show people. In high school, we had the TI-86 calculators, and that was the first time I started with an actual program. Something that it was stupid and dumb, but it was one of my cousin's neighbors had like an earlier version, and he's like, "Here's a dumb choose your own adventure thing I made." Just like, oh my god, it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And then so I was just looking forward to high school just because of that. And
Yeah.
then got it, and immediately, like in the car ride from like the bookstore buying stupid things, I'm like messing with it. And then I had to figure out basic, and like, it's so different from anything else, but it's still that workflow of it goes line by line. It's in order. This is how, the black box was slowly being opened. And then just that first moment of like, here's a stupid choose your own adventure story about the high school. It's got all the teachers you know and love in it. It can only appeal to a very small like population in the entire world. But like being able to hand that calculator to somebody that wasn't even good friends with, he's just like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know, here, tell me what you think." And it's just like, yeah, that was funny. And handing it back, just like to be able to give somebody something to play. Like that was just pure addiction after that. It was an addiction to be able to give something to someone to interact with. And but still, like I said, still not very programmer minded. But I think the way every Flash developer gets started, you go on Newgrounds or Armor Games or Congregate, and you just go, I want to do that, and that's it. That's you. There's for me, there was like a animation troupe, Tomorrow's Nobodies. They had a video series
Yeah.
of them and their friends, and there was one guy that I think I talked to him at some point. Like he was kind of one of their friends, but not really part of the core thing. And he made this little like brick break game, and I was just like, whoa, Flash can make games. Like, that's crazy. That I should look into this. And so downloaded the program, and then I wanted to put things on Newgrounds, but I wasn't making anything. And then and Nox was becoming popular on Newgrounds. You had these little blue clay figures, and it was just hilarious. Like all his stuff was gold, but just that like guy in a room with a dumb camera, and he just made a thing and then yelled into a terrible mic and then put it on the internet, and people would watch him like, oh, I want part of that. I want to be able to do that. And so I was working on some stop motion stuff around the same time. Like I got into, I got a PowerBook. I started using Macs because it had the FireWire port, and like video was standard. So, it wasn't like a terrible USB capture that didn't work right. Like you could get video onto a Mac and edit it kind of built into it as part of the package. And there was some really cool, like iStop motion, I think I used. But like, so it was kind of just all in place. It was there, it was visible. Like you knew what you had to do once you realized that it could be done. And in Flash, there's this Kermit Combat, an old Newgrounds series. So just that, like, what if Kermit the Frog steals your girlfriend? Like, I love that. And it was this epic series just based on that one stupid idea, and it was so great. And there's one where it's like a Dragon Ball Z fight, mock up, and you could click on a button and it would do a thing, and it was just like a choose your adventure thing. It's just like, oh, interactivity. I could click on a thing and do a thing. That's great. Let's do Flash. Let's do it. And then, and so I was still like doing the claymation first because I was just camera button, one thing at a time. And I think it is so important to be able to do one thing at a time, and it's not just this like insurmountable black box rabbit hole of like, how do you make games? It's like it was I was making videos. All right, how do I distribute the videos? Well, Newgrounds has the portal, and hey, stop motion animation's doing pretty well right now. I can throw that in the Flash. I can render it, toss it in. Flash can kind of do video. And then I'm like, well, I can make a play button. I can just do these little things. Like I could have a stick figure and put a button, and when you click the button, the stick figure dies. That's crazy. And just from there, like just one thing, one step at a time, being able to draw a thing, animate a thing, put a little bit of code to it, make things collide, and just one step at a time. And then it was just, yeah, and then, yeah, there's an entire story before getting to, hey, I want to make a platformer because I like platformers. It's just this the long process. I was in college at the time, so I could kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life around then, and so that's, I mean, like losing Flash and losing that community. I think you lose. It's hard for me not to see how I got to where I am now as being so specific and so enabled by this one technology that is so different from everything else. And just, I mean, I guess taking that personally,
It
you
is.
want to kill the thing that enabled me to be who I am today. And I mean, maybe it's weird to take it that personally,
It's emotional. It's
Yeah, yeah.
devastating.
It's a huge part of my identity. And I mean, even not only like what that's made me, but the kind of person I am. I always wanted to draw something, to animate something, to make a video about something. I could continue that using Flash. I couldn't do that with the Unreal Engine or Unity back then. You couldn't do anything like that. There was nothing that was visual, that was stage dependent, that could integrate with what you were already doing. In a you put a video in Flash, and there it is. You're not loading it from a server. You're not figuring it out. It's there physically, and then you can move the playhead. It's all controlled by code, not drag and drop, but it all has a visual representation that, I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that enabled me to get like my foot in the door, to take those first steps, to get to being, I mean, I still think I'm a terrible programmer now, but being able to write code that does code things, it's this workflow that is, I mean, what are we gonna be missing out on once that's gone? How many people will not have that opportunity to get into an art that they are passionate about? It's because now everybody just wants to be streamers and let's players, and like that's I'd say that, I mean, just because that's what Flash developer was back in the day. Like, everybody wanted to be a Flash developer. We wanted to make games. We wanted to do that, and we saw the path. We saw a logical path of like what we were playing around with to how we could get it in other people's hands.
That is funny. I suppose it's probably the same kid, the same type of kid,
And
and
so,
what is accessible has
like an
changed.
e-gamer, professional gamer,
Yeah.
it's that the passion, the job that you can be passionate about, that you think you can personally, um, contribute to that art form in some way, that you can change the world, in some way, in some small way. And it's, man, it's I guess I have to shut down emotionally in some way, or I wouldn't function. But it's deep into the core of me and who I am, that I feel like we're really losing something for, I mean, not even just people like me, but people like, and people in general, people who think a certain way, who would thrive under certain conditions.
There are a lot of people I've talked to who their gateway was drawing stick figures in Flash, discovering you can make a
Yeah.
button, and what else can I do? That's like,
Yeah.
what's the next
What
step beyond that?
what else can I do?
Yeah.
Like how can I grow? How can I make something just a little bit better? Like, just, man, that's it's addicting. What else can I do?
Oh, absolutely.
It's it's expanding. Right? It expands your being, expands who you are when you can make something more. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, from there, I probably gotta get to dinner and stuff and see what's going on. And
uh, for
I don't know. Yeah,
sure.
if there's anything else,
Sure. I guess I
super
had a
late.
few questions from, like I threw it out there a while back and was like, I don't know. I think
Hmm.
I'm going to be talking to Brad if people want to throw.
Oh
And
shoot, could we do that later? I feel like it's gonna be kind of low energy if it's like actual like people that. Would that
sure.
be all right?
Maybe I take the, because we just naturally through bouncing off things that probably got through a lot of what I had in mind to
Hmm.
talk about.
Okay, so yeah,
I
if you can answer those questions with what we've gone through, but if there's
I
anything
could
else,
I could also like because I had purposely assembled like a extra large amount of questions, assuming we wouldn't
mhm.
get to all of them. Um, I could work through that and chop it to like 10 questions or five or something, and just
Mhm.
whether we get back on a call,
Okay.
whether you would rather answer that through
Yeah,
text
send
or
those to me because I know once I start talking about this stuff, then my wife is like, "Come on, yep." See, there's the phone. So,
I mean, I'm
um,
right up on about dinner time myself as well.
yeah.
Yes, that makes sense.
So if you could send me that, I can at least look over, maybe have more concise answers, and we'll try to like set a hard thing because you start, yeah, I start talking about Flash and all that. I'm like, no, it'll be quick. We just gotta go through some questions, and my wife's like,
Yeah,
so
I mean, same
yeah.
as like my own girlfriend there. She probably would rather I, don't dump it all on her.
Mm.
Flash is bumming me out this month. I really miss it. She doesn't know what I'm
Oh
talking
no,
about.
I know. Every time I stare off into the distance, and then I'm just like, I start shaking my head, and then I'm like, all right, back to real life,
Right.
Uh,
Okay. Well, it was good talking to you, man. Thank you
no, I
for
mean,
opening up
as
and
like nostalgic and depressing it gets, it's nice. It's fun thinking about that. I mean, even thinking that what I have to say matters to anyone is kind of cool. It's nice to hear. And
100%.
I guess yeah, it's cool that this is still relevant. I mean, even getting it compiled, I like putting out YouTube videos. I just never put out enough. I like talking about this sort of thing, or even thinking that people want to hear what I'm saying. So if any of that gets out there, I think that's really cool.
I'm looking forward to doing something with it. I'm very excited, just in the same way that I'm sure it's fun to dig back into those old
Mm.
games, crack them open, and do something new with it. Like looking
Yeah,
back
I
at that,
man, that would be a good video. Just all the games that aren't fancy pants. Yeah,
right?
the pre fancy pants ideas, and just look at stuff. I've been meaning to go through that for a while.
Oh
I try to make
man, yeah. If you ever put that together, that's like my absolute favorite thing. For I've
yeah,
been trying to do
it's
some of
really
that
cool.
myself, like opening
Yeah, I
up
always I get
15.
curious about
Yeah.
people that I'm a fan of like that, and so it's hard for me to think like that. But like, I would want to see this about this person, so maybe somebody wants to see that from me. Okay, fine.
I've a
Uh,
folder of things I haven't touched in years because my idea is like I almost want to forget it. I want to forget what my intent was, what it, and like I want to open
yeah.
it up with these fresh eyes
Uh,
and try to think like what
there's
was
some
I.
game. Yeah,
Yeah.
even like playing. I went back to Mirror's Edge like years later, and I was just like, oh, it does like everything kind of clicks then because you're so focused on trying to piece things together. But if you can take a step back and look at the gameplay and the music and all of it just kind of together with fresh eyes, you're like, oh, okay, I see why people like this. That's cool.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I do. I would love to. One of these days, I just make a video that's just cracking open old Swifts, and I try to make a lot of that or most of them available from like Patreon people, and so at least trying to get that out there somewhere. But now they can't just click on my site and play it anymore. So that's thank you,
Yeah,
web
that that
overlords.
kills.
Wonderful.
I can't even. Yeah, can't even think about that. That's been bumming me
Yeah.
out.
Like I said, I need to make some bundles, put the old games up
Hmm.
on itch.io, put some bundles together of old stuff for for Patreon patrons, and and just get that out there. Because at least you can wrap it up in air. It's not too difficult. But it's another step. Just one more thing to deal with. It's like, I don't know, is this video for kids? Like, I don't know. What does that mean? Like, I don't want to look this up. I'm not a YouTuber. Like, don't give me another thing to do. Like, worrying about my ads and my audience and monetization and SEO. And I don't care about any of this. I just want to hit record, play some game, put it on the YouTube. It's just,
If you do have questions about some of that side of things, feel free to hit me up.
Okay.
That
Yeah,
like made
I
for
might.
kids thing, if it's not
I just
like
say it's not.
if it's not an
Did it
episode
go-
of Blue's Clues where that if
Yeah,
you're
right.
if
Or
you're not talking
Spider-Man
down to anyone, like if
also.
it doesn't matter if it's cartoons or whatever, that all passes the for kids filter. Anything
Yeah, but then
you're making is gonna pass.
I think they took it off because after I did that, it goes, "Will kids accidentally watch this?" I'm like, I'm their parents now. Like, why is that my problem?
Yeah, that's
Like, who cares? And I keep everything clean, but then you don't get monetized, and it's so stupid. And it's not like, sure, we're protecting people, but like in the same way with Flash being able to enable people who aren't programmers, like people should be able to throw things on YouTube. They should be able to do live streams. Maybe they make games for a living and they want to show off what they're making, or they want to make some art. They want to just do a stream. They are setting in a place that you need to do it full time to just do anything with it or to monetize it. You need to be of the complete mind. It's like, I'm trying to release this game over here. Let me just talk about it on YouTube. And it's like, oh, but it's not hard to figure. It's like, no, but I'm not a YouTuber. Let me. That's the thing. I don't know, but that's kind of how Flash was. I think it enabled people who weren't Flash developers to do stupid things, and YouTube enabled people who weren't like
filmmakers,
professional video editors, right, to throw videos up there to stream about their other job, and they're just putting these little roadblocks. Like, you need to have the clickbaity thumbnail. Like, what if I don't want to do that? What if I just want to throw it online? And it's everything going from that. It all has to be, because that's the big companies that can hire the consultants and the social media managers and buy the bot views, and it's everything. Everything's getting away from that. And
I guess
I'm the worst old man about it.
That is the same way that the App Store was frustrating that they pull in EA, is that YouTube is Jimmy Fallon. Flash games were exactly. Teenagers exclusively.
And the news and late night and SNL, and they're hanging on. They're kicking and screaming, making it hard to just be seen.
It is funny that Flash almost boxed that out entirely. There were the odd thing that was like a branded released product that people might click and play, or something like Mirror's Edge, where it is a unique game that is a quality game that
couldn't be
uses that IP. But it was never a cash grab, or like that one's not a cash grab. The ones that were just a very obvious art swap of something else was like, it's Angry Birds with
Star Wars.
Exactly. Well, I don't care.
Right.
That's not new. And I think that people could see through that in Flash very easily.
I think they did. I think they were used to being treated with more respect than that. And I don't know. I think my biggest takeaway is like, and it might just be me being stupid and grumpy and cynical about the internet, but I don't think Flash could have survived with where things are going, with how tightly things need to be controlled, with how things are, the headache of the platform. You need to be kicked off, you need to be restricted, you need to be demonetized. You can't do it with Flash because we were never good at you took our demonetization. We got 1/10 the prices of YouTube videos from the very beginning. Like, we couldn't, didn't matter. You couldn't hurt us like that. So now Flash can't survive in today's internet. It needed to be destroyed.
They can't hurt us anymore, right?
Right. Well, so the only thing left is just so nothing else worked, so they just have to delete it from the internet. They had to literally throw the kill switch that nothing loads anymore, even if people try to keep older versions of browsers. It's insane. I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
was overkill for sure.
That was, yeah. I went to my own site and was like, oh, half my site doesn't work. All right, anyway, that's my
I'll
wife
let you
telling
I'll
me
let you
that
get
it.
out of here.
All right, man. I'll
Hey,
yeah, through missed questions. Maybe if we set a hard timeline or something. Because I love just kind of do the stream of consciousness. But if we don't need to do anything else, or I'll just type some answers or something. But yeah, if you have like, if you have some viewers, let
yeah.
me make
I'll,
sure that they don't feel left out or whatever. So,
all right,
all right,
I'll
man.
let you get to it. Thanks again for doing this, man. I'll be in
No,
touch.
this was a lot of fun. I definitely hope so. Because yeah, I mean, I was flabbergasted you made a video about fancy pants in the first place. So it's awesome to be, relevant again, I guess, for a bit. But
Excited to
do
play my part,
do
hopefully, you know.
what I we'll see. All right,
Okay.
man.